Good morning, everyone, again. If I could ask everyone to take their seats, just want to say thank you for joining us this morning. This is the second State of the University speech that I have been privileged to be a part of and to hear. And I won't talk for very long now, but I do want to introduce our president, Dr. Lloyd Axworthy.
Well, good morning, everybody, and special welcome to members of the graduating classes who are here for homecoming. It's always a nice idea to be able to share some of our thoughts about the development of the university with those who have been so important to those developments in the past. So I want to welcome and hope you have a good weekend of celebration with your classmates, and I'm sure I'll be seeing many of you along the way. I hope all of you have signed up for the bocce tournament Saturday afternoon. That will be clearly the test of the ongoing commitment and dedication of our alumni classes to put themselves forward in this high-level world tournament that we're sponsoring. I want to begin this morning just with a little event that took place a couple of weeks ago. Richard Graydon, who some of you know is a former chair of our Board of Regents, came in to see me, and with him brought the memory and recollection that several years back, more than several years back, an agreement had been signed between the Murray family and the University of Winnipeg that when and if and how the Murray Farm building, which is a part of a very large expanse going back to the original Selkirk settlers, was to be developed, that the stones that make up the foundation of that building would be deeded to the University of Winnipeg. The reason being is that way back in the 1870s, those stones were the floor of the then Murray building, which constituted a one-room Manitoba College beginning. So it does bring back the recollection that from little stones to large Richardson science complexes grow over a period of time. The stones we're going to use, by the way, to probably start a competition amongst some of our city artists to determine how we can build a icon or an Iquitos or a wall or something, so it will be reminding all of us of the legacy that we trace back to that one-room Manitoba College inception. So it gives you a sense of the breadth of, or length of our sort of appearance as a learning institution, and also something of the degree to which we have evolved over those years in a variety of different ways. This year has been a special year in many ways because it's been a year of stock taking, determining how we can adjust our sites to a different trajectory that has been partly shaped for us simply by the events around us, but certainly to meet the very vastly changing environment of higher education. A challenge that's faced not just by us, but by universities and colleges really throughout North America. In fact, I guess we could extend it almost in the global sense. But it does put in relief one of the important characteristics of this university in the light of the volatility and the rapid flow of changes, and that has been our resilience. Maybe that's partly the moral of the story of the Murray Manitoba stones, that we have been able to show an ability to adapt, to change, to respond, and that the quality of resilience is one that requires certain character, certain commitment, certain understanding, and always a willingness to be open to some change and to understand the way in which we can organize ourselves around different ideas and concepts, being open to them. And I think that that has been one of the defining features of the various iterations, beginning with Manitoba, then Wesley, then United, and now University of Winnipeg, as it traces its history. It has been its ability to maintain its certain core sense of values and mission, but find different ways of expressing it, finding equal contemporary references by which we would determine our fate and future. And this resilience has been layered, I think, generation after generation by the interaction of faculty and students with the broader community and being able to continue that kind of dialogue. And I think there's no character trait that will be put more to the test and more relied upon than in the immediate and foreseeable future, because of the quite dramatic and depth of transformations that are taking place in the world itself, but also ones that have a direct impact upon us. But it does mean that that constant ability to adapt and move will be sort of a requirement. This past year, we undertook an academic strategic review. We have had serious consultations with a variety of community organizations. We have asked sort of people from other universities to come and look at what we were doing. We've had a multiple approach to trying to understand better where we're at, who we are, and to begin to provide some prescriptions about where we go. The next step in that process will be drawn from some of the initial discussions that we've had, and that is to decentralize in a way, to transfer the next stage of assessment and evaluation back into the individual faculties, so that students and professors in each of those faculties can give a more specific defining description about how in each of their respective roles that they play, they will be able to come up with a practical set of objectives, goals, and actions that will be drawn from the unique experience that faculties have in terms of their teaching and the research and the outreach that they undertake. And that will bring, in a sense, a stronger voice into the ongoing process of redefining that trajectory and developing a navigation guidebook, if you like, for future steps and how both to avoid pitfalls, to deal with certain underlying coral reefs and shoals that get in our way, and also where we can best sort of set our goals and our pathway through a clear landscape and to avoid certain barriers. But what is clear, we are now in a different space, and that is very much, I think, due to the work of diligence and cooperation that people in this room have undertaken as we've become an active, growing campus and a key partner in the development of the downtown and the inner city. One of the most important things I think that has been active as part of the state of the university is the increasing culture that is developing in the university dedicated to removing barriers to education and learning. That is not true in all institutions. Many universities and colleges see themselves as elite institutions, that they try to draw sort of lines around who is eligible or available to become part of a learning process. I don't believe that that is where this university is at. In fact, I think in many respects we take the lead in helping to define how the barriers can be removed, whether they're physical ones, social, emotional, financial. That is a task that is particularly relevant to the kind of world that we live in. And what I also have come to believe and see in the conversations and discussions is that we have become a force within the community in the creation of creative spaces, those areas, those special areas in which people are attracted to think, to interact, to develop, to put their best minds to work, they draw upon their richness of experience and research capacity to start defining ways in which the institution itself, but also the people within the institution and the larger community can find those innate creative impulses that are so important to who we are as a human community. You know, I think of the kind of activity that has evolved in the Global College over the years, the oral history program, which is really sort of cutting new edges for a kind of research in the historical fields. The way in which the Institute of Urban Studies has become a leader in the study of homelessness as part of a national area of research. The master's degree in Indigenous development practice, the Center for Research in Young People's Texts and Cultures, an Indigenous Advisory Circle that has now become part of our governance system. These are just some small examples of how we are defining some unique events and initiatives that we hope and believe will become part of a pattern, a part of a model that other institutions can follow, and in which we can help sort of generate a larger, broader creative space within the city of Winnipeg and the province as we become part of a global network where nodes of creativity are those which are essential to our growth and development. More specific examples, if I could just make one that is just very recent, and that is being here in the Richardson Complex, is the initiation of the new Northern Sustainable Prosperity Initiative, tied in with the work that's been going on by our students and the faculty in Churchill for many years, the sustainability study. We have been asked to join in with the task forces that are working on northern development to provide research and background about Manitoba's northern region, our relationship with Nunavut, the development of an Arctic gateway, and as we all know, the opening of the circumpolar region in our front yard will be perhaps one of the most significant international developments in the next 10 years. It will draw upon the best of the Canadian angels in our spirit to be able to manage our way through massive resource development, cultural change, melting ice, new climate, and an incredible need for cooperation and international collaboration. So we will be a part of that. We will be able to participate in through the initiative at the Richardson College in terms of having our researchers, those who are involved, students, invitation to outside participants to become part of that creative space in around that area. Academically, I think we continue to excel. And if I might just take a moment to do a little boasting on behalf of the university, we now have 5 Canadian research chairs. This spring, the Social Science and Humanities Research Council announced a very substantial $7.5 million research funding from 3 national studies that involve highly respected members of our faculty, Dr. Gino DeStasio, Dr. Evelyn Peters, Dr. Don Sutherland, and Dr. Alex Freund has just also received a SHRC grant to begin to be part of the project leader for the oral history project. 2 respected faculty members, Wendy Josephine, I think I saw Wendy here, and Catherine Taylor, are tackling the issue of bullying, which I think is one of the real scourges of our schools and our local communities. Dr. Craig Willis, as we know, has received international renown for his important breakthrough on the research into the white nose syndrome for bats, shedding light on how the threat to extinction to this very important part of our chain of life is being developed. And if any of you feel so inspired after I finish putting you to sleep, You can go up and take a look at the Batmobile up on the top of the Richardson building, which Craig operates with great facility. The Department of Education is being widely recognized for its work. I think Professor Alan Weeb's pilot project on mentoring young offenders, teaching literacy skills in our prisons and in our juvenile detention areas, again, really fits an area of essential work. And I was really pleased to see that under the initiation of the criminal justice program 2 weeks ago, brought together again a interesting assembly of faculty members to talk about how we can deal with the crime and poverty issue that affects all of us here in the city of Winnipeg. And I think it's fair to say that in the time I have been at the university as president, I won't go back in the time when I was a student, because that would sort of give away both age as well as degree of public exposure. I'm not prepared to reveal at this time. That we have been able to attract a very talented group of young faculty members who, through the mentoring of the senior professors, I think has brought together a really quite interesting academic mosaic, the kind of interactions between those with experience, veteran knowledge with those who bring the latest refreshment out of their graduate training or experience, is really providing an interesting dynamic inside our academic folds. And we are building on that academic excellence and the way in which it is transferred to students through the development of new graduate programs, interdisciplinary programs, enhanced research, new faculties in business and economics, kinesiology, and relevant new degrees in human rights, indigenous knowledge, disability studies. It's important to note then, to accommodate that, the University of Winnipeg footprint has grown by about 24% in the last 6 or 7 years. That's partly because we have been able to consolidate a lot of random units that were spread around the city as if they're some kind of academic Johnny Appleseed had decided to sprinkle good fortune, but the end result was a highly expensive way of doing business, as well as not giving the kind of cohesiveness that a campus of this kind can bring in terms of the proximity and facility of people to interact and deal together. But that still has been a substantial area of investment and growth, in which I'm very grateful. I think we all should be grateful to federal, provincial, municipal governments, private donors, and foundations. This building is a clear example of a state-of-the-art facility that compares to anything that takes place in North America, brought together by a real partnership of supporters, alumni, and those who have had an interest in the creation of a university that makes a difference. And I don't have to go through the list, whether it's Richardson or Buehler or Asper or McPheeters. It does give new home and new opportunity. And I think we have also been a spearhead, a leading edge in finding ways to support learners from underrepresented populations, including Indigenous young men and women, new Canadian, many of them coming from war-torn zones where education was one that you got at the end of a gun. Inner city youth who have simply grown up without money, and that poverty is still a distinctive and in some ways shameful part of our ongoing existence in a community as rich and as prosperous, and I think that we are in the center of that particular responsibility. I've said many times that one thing that has always given me some inspiration as well as a sense of obligation is to go back to the original Treaty 1 that was signed about the same time that Manitoba College was brought together in 1870, which set out a whole series of educational and learning responsibilities for First Nations people on behalf of the Queen. Well, the Queen hasn't talked to me recently about how we can do that, but I think in the interpretation that we received from elders and other community members about how we can not only provide learning opportunities, but how we have a special responsibility I think, in this university to help build bridges between our Indigenous people and non-Indigenous communities. Things like the Women's Studies Red Dress initiative a year or so ago, which I just thought was a remarkable way of drawing attention to one of the shameful incidents that take place. But at the same time, building bridges in terms of working together, as we're now doing with projects at Fisher River, Peguis, contemplating one in Shamattawa, working with inner city Aboriginal groups and new Canadians to make them feel welcome, to cooperate and collaborate. The Community Learning Initiative, I think, has, in its own way, provided an atmospheric for this university, which is sensed and understood increasingly across the country, of being one that is giving us a sense of direction in higher education that is being now responded to by other universities. One of the draw upon our resources is the number of visits we now have from other institutions that come here and say, so how are you doing it? How does it work? And I pay tribute. I see Jennifer sitting in the road. She spends more time on the road now having to explain what we're doing to other groups. But that is called education. That is learning, being able to share our experience. So the point I want to make is that university, the idea of a University of Winnipeg, and let's use that word university, now has a real meaning when applied to this place. It's drawn from a deep set of local roots, but with increasing global sensibilities. A high-quality arts and science core academic mission with the emergence of several professional degrees and new graduate programs. A service of tradition to the general education population, but with an openness to underrepresented groups that I would say is second to none of any university in this country. And so we have come far. We are redefining what we are as a university. And I'm grateful for the hard work and patience that many people in this room have contributed over the years. But to use an old line, we still have work to do. And what I think is a basis for that work in the conversations I've had, and I've had, I think at last count, a couple of hundred over the last summer and late spring, is the degree of commitment there is in people in this institution to making this a great place to learn and teach and research. And collectively, we believe in our strengths. I want to acknowledge that there are those who don't entirely agree with that direction and who sort of sometimes put into place concerns. And I respect those concerns and I acknowledge them and realize that we have to begin to fill in some of the gaps and holes that have been identified. We have leapt forward, but there are unattended holes in some of our basic foundations. And that's what I collectively think we need to work on next. The transition we've made in the past decade has elevated us to a different level, but it's time to reinforce that foundation that we work on and that we must have as a solid base if we're to continue in a sustainable, growing way. Keeping this in mind, I'd like to explore some of the challenges we face in fulfilling a new set of objectives. And I just want to put in parentheses that one of the direct results of our work over the spring and summer is that the officers of the Board of Regents have approved a new set of objectives, and I will come to deal with those in a minute. But it has been sort of a marking spot that we are now able to sort of identify where we need to go next. I think probably central to concern, and it's one that is not particularly unique to this university, is the issue of financial stability. Just to give some basic facts, as you know, the provincial government provides about 50% of the university's operating revenues through a grant, which in the last 3 years has been at the level of 5%, which is a good grant compared to what's happening in other areas. Student tuition and fees are now for another 28%. So the question is, where does that other 25, 23% come from? And that has been, I think, one of the great sort of conundrums and issues of how we fill the gap. How do we begin to sort of ensure that sort of gap, which is not often recognized in terms of a stable funding base, is particularly and usefully developed as part of our ongoing set of objectives. Because without it, I know this may sound sort of too financially oriented, but without resources, the university does not thrive. It's as simple as that. There's 3 or 4 reasons for it. One is, we know, has been for reasons that go back in 40 years into the history, we receive a smaller operating grant per student than the other universities in Manitoba. In our own assessments, which we have presented publicly and which we have sort of made the case, and I appreciate very much how at the legislative hearings last spring, members of faculty, UWA, the Students Association, along with the administration and the Board of Regents, made a united front in terms of saying or asking that particular gap and disparity be addressed. But we are looking at about a $6,500 per student level of grant compared to $12,000 at the other 2 institutions. Now, there's other extenuating circumstances, but that simply means that our enrollment, which has been about 55% over the last 8 years, has meant that increasingly the value of the set grant shrinks as each student walks through the door. And we're not going to close those doors because that's what our mission is. But it still creates an issue that I think all of us at the university have to continue to address. Second, we need to continue to honor significant pension commitments that have been made. We're at a time when, because of the economic circumstances, all the actuarial calculations were thrown out the window in 2008 and 2009. Plus, there are special decisions that were made 10 or 12 years ago at the university around pensions that were, I guess one could subject to some rear view mirror review. But nevertheless, we cannot in any way shirk our responsibilities to maintain those commitments to those who have worked, staff and faculty, in a diligent way to maintain their own stability as they retire. But it does put increasing pressure and divert resources from our learning responsibilities. Last year alone, as you know, in the budget, there was a $4.5 million go-forward evaluation that needs to be paid for. And how we do it is going to be is part of the oftentimes unappreciated task that Bill Ballin and Mike Emsley and other people in our financial board, as well as the members of the Board of Regents, have had to grapple with. And we are working diligently on how we can better reinforce the capacity to meet those pension responsibilities, because we're not going to sort of shirk in any way those obligations to those who have been our pioneers in the development of the university. It's a widespread concern. There isn't really an institution, organization in the country that isn't grappling with it, but we have our own particular parameters and limitations to meet this. Thirdly, I think there is increasing competition. You know, we blithely talk about globalization. It's a tremendous wide opening of opportunities, but it also means that there's a lot more scope and choice for young people from this province to go elsewhere. That we increasingly see that there is a broad band of competition taking place for a shrinking number of students in certain areas. Fortunately, we have a demographic sort of bulge on our side. The ongoing investment in immigration, which brings 15,000 to 20,000 new people to the province every year, will have a strong compensation for that draw. The movement of our First Nations and Métis and Inuit into the city of Winnipeg gives us further educational opportunities to draw on. But that means we have to restage ourselves. You can't continue to sort of say we do it the same way as we did, because we're dealing not only with the new competition that is there and what other universities have to offer, but also the fact that we have a new constituency of education and learning that we need to find effective ways to meet. And one of the key elements in doing that is the degree to which we provide proper and appropriate services to our students. It takes resources, but I think it is an essential commitment that we provide effective health, counseling, food, accommodation services. I'm disturbed at times when I realize how many young people come to this university without access to a family doctor, and therefore must scramble if an illness takes place or there is some sense of needing medical or help, how difficult it is if you don't have those basic connections. Does that cost us resources? Yes, it does. Can we do without it? No, we can't. And therefore, one of the major parts of a reorganization we took this summer was to consolidate our services: food, bookstores, housing, counseling, awards, and things, so that we can work together in a seamless way to provide what I think would be a highly respectable commitment to those kinds of services. So there are issues out there that need to be dealt with, but if you're resilient, you deal with them. You don't gnash your teeth, you don't sort of go to the Wailing Wall, you simply say, okay, let's find a way to resolve, and in fact, use at times an opportunity to review and reassess how we do things. Because despite these challenges, I believe we can move forward while addressing the budget concerns that we all share. We are at a point of inflection. We've changed. And while there may be some understandable nostalgia for the past, and a simpler time and simpler institutions, it's a little remindful of a certain political convention that took place 2 weeks ago. The amount of support for the changes that we have, I think, is growing, but it needs to be strengthened. And in this case, I would make a special appeal to those members of our alumni who are here for homecoming to see how you can become much more effective in helping us to make those changes. But reflecting on those outlines of a new landscape, I submitted a set of new objectives were approved by the table officers this summer that will help to rebuild and reset what we're doing. It means a shift away from a priority that we set in terms of the rebuilding of our infrastructure and consolidating our campus into a strong focus on academic development. There's 4 key areas that are contained in those objectives. First, innovative use of online teaching, more very flexible use of teaching time to provide a more diverse learning platform, an increase in support for incentives for curriculum and program innovation, conferencing, staff enhancements, and new partnerships. Our focus will be on developing an academic universe which is second to none, and which also is able to make decisions about its respective roles and how they can integrate and work together. The second one is to, as I said, improve and integrate student services. We must take a more entrepreneurial approach to the funding of all our activities to make up those gaps. And the fourth is a focus on administrative reorganization that is leading to better efficiencies and streamlining and cost savings. Many of you know, because we sort of sent out memos over the summer, that we have already started a major reorganization at the administrative level in terms of changing responsibilities, integrating, eliminating certain units, positions, and we already are beginning to see the results of some of those savings. Underlying all of this, in a way, is this sort of sense, maybe it's one that I think we all gather in different ways, and that is just how the transformation that is really shifting the landscape under our feet is the impact of what is called the digital revolution. The use of the internet is one of the most powerful trends in education. We're emerging into a new digital universe where universities around the world are now offering free classes taught by world-renowned professors. We're now working with a generation of students whose use and application of mobile phones and digital media is their primary source of information and communication. Video games have become the source of learning and entertainment. It's a different world. I jokingly said at one point when we were talking about the need to restaff a position in our technical services that we need to recruit the brightest of the 12-year-olds who really do understand the kind of world that we're now living in. One of the direct impacts of this transformative experience is the need to constantly upgrade our information systems and infrastructures, but it also means it seriously challenges traditional pedagogy and the academic organization of the university. In a very interesting book written jointly by a friend of mine, John Seeley Brown, along with two other colleagues at Stanford University called John Hagel and Davidson, they describe what they call the big shift brought on by the new information age. And I quote, they say, "It's a fundamental reordering of the way we live, the way we learn, socialize, play, and work." They introduce in that the idea of an open source university that allows students to take courses online whenever they choose, in different sequences and groupings, giving maximum flexibility to the student. And that's the key word. We have to develop that maximum flexibility of choice and opportunity for all kinds of students, for different needs and different outlooks in order to meet the kind of world that we're now living in. So this is not some sort of fantasy. We're not playing fantasy football. We are engaged in something that is fundamentally reordering, as the authors of this particular book say, the way we live and the way we learn. And therefore, as an institution that goes back to 1870, we better decide how in 2012 we begin to do the reordering ourselves to not only to keep pace, but to take advantage of these quite fascinating, challenging opportunities that's created by, in effect, a worldwide net, and how we begin to put ourselves in a special niche within that network. We need to determine our own digital information strategy. This is not piecemeal. This is not one little segment at a time. It's something that I think needs to be a combined and holistic approach to the whole issue of how we respond. We need to undertake major upgrades of our technical capacity just to keep pace. And as you can obviously see, these are serious resource undertakings. You don't do those with a nickel. But we have some, I think, big pluses. We're the only university in Canada with 3 state-of-the-art Cisco telepresence studios that can connect our faculty to their peers, our students to lectures or other classrooms anywhere in the globe. We have faculty now beginning to use the new technology that these studios provide for collaboration teaching. I want to increase threefold the application of that new online digital over the next year and begin to really make it an integral part of what we do. A stronger online teaching presence will allow us to dramatically increase our global reach, attract students in virtual classrooms that we can measure in the thousands. And there's no question that one of the byproducts will be a substantial strengthening of our financial base. We've had success on this front. I look at the experience that the Global College initiated this spring, where they offered 3 spring and summer institutes, key one focusing on resource development and indigenous property rights. It's probably one of the in-your-face issues around the world. How do you take sort of the fundamental cultural and historical rights of indigenous people, close to 1 billion people around the world, but happen to be occupying territory where the most aggressive demand for new resource development is taking place. What's the intermix between that? Well, through cooperation with the master's degree programs and the Global Institute, we offered 3 separate sessions with recognized guest professor Dr. Ginger Gibson, who has written a manual on negotiation between indigenous people and resource industries. We had Maria Delgado from a indigenous group working in Peru, in the southern Amazon, who are coming to grips with this issue and have developed a new concept, if you like, that not just the responsibility to participate, but the responsibility to make decisions. They have pushed the edge of that process even further. Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair gave a fascinating discussion in part of that module on treaty rights and legal rights that take place. That small little institute over a couple of spring weekends attracted over 300 students online. It provided a substantial source of revenue for the Global College. It broadened our presence in a field of debate and discussion that is now taking place virtually in every authority and jurisdiction. It's just a small sample of what can be done. But it did take some serious rethinking about how you offer the talent and resources that exist in the university in our academic community. I'd like to encourage far more offerings of this kind at different times and places on different kinds of issues that will be able to generate for us a much stronger presence focused on what has been our traditional strengths in this university. Last year, we spoke of creating multiple pathways into the university, and this refers both to the community aspects, which is being undertaken virtually by every faculty, but also means creating greater interest in the variety of students in that larger global network that we have. There is an aching demand for high-level professional re-education in downtown Winnipeg. Our new Dean of Business, Sylvia Bear, is here, who understands this because she's worked at it. I can't recall a meeting, one strong meeting I had with the Business Council representatives as part of our consultation this spring, and what was their first requirement? They say, we like what you're doing, but how does it work with us in terms of upgrading our workforce, our professional management, the things that we have to do in order to be able to meet the new demands for export and import and transportation and supply demand chains and all the rest of it. So our people in our businesses need you to help us re-educate and redefine. Well, I think that's a challenge that was put out to us by members of our business community who said, you're our downtown university, now show us how we can work together. And I think it's a number of the initiatives that PACE is now taking to establish that, and through the business faculty, we have the opportunity to do that. Our new graduate programs in the economics, resource and development economics, in curatorial studies, in bioscience, technology, public policies, are bringing new students to the campus. What's also bringing new students to the campus, I discovered, is the fact that as our athletic department develops new offerings as part of the university requirements that we have certain sport commitments in the CIUS, it brings with it all kinds of new students. Talking to some of the members of our newly arrived baseball team, you wouldn't believe the kind of presence the University of Winnipeg now has in southeastern Manitoba, the heartland of strong baseball tournaments in the summer, because we now have a group of young men who are bringing them and their friends to become part of a baseball culture. And I like that. I think that That's a sense of excellence too. I mean, we can talk about excellence in physics and poetry and reading, but excellence in athletics, fitness, development, I think are really part of that creative space that we as a university must provide, and I'll speak a little bit more about that. But I also want to sort of make a strong case to members of our faculty and staff that we need to forge more partnerships. We need to develop and enhance our capacities by working with others. There is a huge demand for learning in virtually every sector of this community. We have the institutional base and the historical evolution to provide it. But that means that the idea that we can be islands unto ourselves, that we preserve certain areas that we think are pristine, doesn't work anymore. It doesn't mean you suffer standards. That's an old canard, I think, that should no longer be sort of drawn out as an excuse for not developing partnerships. That, I think, is where part of our future lies. I'm thinking, for example, that as we slowly evolve in terms of our work in theater and dance and creative writing, what would happen if we began to form some new partnerships in visual arts, design into the mix? You know, downtown Winnipeg is probably one of the strongest sources of arts and cultural institutions of any city of its size within North America. I would say in a much larger context. Closer cooperation, as the Collegiate's beginning to do with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet and the Contemporary Dancers, is a good example of how we can begin to develop educational learning collaboration in the arts and areas of cultural institutions. The Curatorial Studies Master's Program is a good beginning in those areas. But there's a lot more that can be done if we open up our minds and find the ways to do those connections. And I'm fully understanding that to make these kind of new arrangements, collaborations, and networks work, there has to be agreement and a consensus on the changes, clear case for buy-in of reform by faculty and students, unions, and our alumni. And that's why I'm proposing as part of our new objectives to make major changes in the decision-making system of the university, to encourage greater involvement, participation of deans and faculty councils and students. There will be a budget decentralization framework to the faculty level, a mandate for each faculty to create its own strategic plan. We've also realigned our administration structure to reflect better the directions and priorities. This includes providing our academic and administrative leadership with the responsibility to encourage innovative outcomes in our academic areas. We're establishing a President's Task Force on Academic Development to offer support. It will be brought forward at the end of September to encourage innovation, special projects, faculty research. Such a task force can be the incubator for new programs. There's very interesting discussions going around the campus about how we begin to integrate into a community health sort of system. Not one that is competing with a medical faculty, but begins to take a look at the way in which the whole area of health and fitness is changing. We'll talk a little bit about our new Recplex in a minute. But this is the kind of thing that the task force, I think, would be open to in terms of examining how does it work, how do you pay for it, and how do you do it. And in this year's budget, we've set aside certain amounts of money to encourage that innovation. But we realize that we can't do it simply on our existing resources. And that's why, as part of the objectives that submitted to the board and which they've approved, is to the launching in early October of a new future fund with a goal of raising $10 to $15 million to specifically support academic units and innovation on campus that will add to the budget resources we already have. The goal is to work with deans and faculty to develop a gift opportunity list support things like faculty research, nurturing of young faculty, attracting distinguished lecturers, improving the IT systems, facilitating knowledge transfer, and commercialization activities, investing in distant learning programs. That's a personal commitment I'm making. As you know, one of the success stories of the University of Winnipeg has been our Opportunity Fund, where we've been able to raise substantial amounts of funding to support over now 1,000 low-income students. It's a remarkable example of how we've been able to specifically design a fundraising objective with a clear purpose, and it's working. Now we have to do the same for academic development, and the Future Fund will be the vehicle in which we will redirect our fundraising activities, working in cooperation with deans, department chairs, faculties, to identify where we're going. And I think I see Brian Daly from the Foundation office. We've had our discussions. We will be working in close partnership in developing that fund through our annual giving, through our family campaigns, and some specifically targeted major donations. It won't be easy. It's tough making money out there these days. There's lots of people on the street, but we can do it. And I certainly intend to make that over the next 2 to 3 years a major focus of how we can ensure, not only now but in the future, that we have the wherewithal to maintain the momentum and the development of where we want to go. In that case, we also have to retain our nimbleness. You know, part of being a smaller university, but one that has its act together, is that we can work fast, make decisions, get on with the job, and pick up on opportunities. Serendipity is a word that increasingly is becoming into vogue in the academic world, meaning chance encounters that can lead to new ideas and new developments. We have that opportunity, and through our Community Renewal Corporation, where Sherman Kreiner is our executive director, and by the way, our new vice president for student life, we are now engaged in a number of efforts to work in partnership to develop new facilities. One small example is how we've worked together with the community on the redevelopment of the Merchants Hotel activity on Selkirk Avenue, a project that is instrumental to the university because the Urban Studies program, which is located on Selkirk, has been instrumental in bringing that kind of partnership together. So all of a sudden we have now developed a way in which we can be a vehicle in which that very important project. We are working similarly with Fisher River on a project to convert junk fish into fertilizer. We're working with Pegwas on land use planning. We're beginning to work with a number of other community organizations to help define economic development goals and social development goals. Perhaps the place where we have the most obvious demonstration of that is in our own campus. Diversity Foods, a social enterprise that was started 2.5 years ago because our own food system was pretty classic, mediocre. Diversity has now established a reputation for diverse foods, meeting new cultural needs, organic, healthy menus, becoming an interesting force in changing the buying patterns and the agricultural patterns around Winnipeg in terms of the use of new food, locally grown food materials. That was started by in this university. It's unlike anywhere else of any other institution in Canada. We have to take not only some satisfaction in having been the seedbed for that kind of institution, but also recognize what it can mean in terms of our understanding of where we go from here in helping to redefine issues of sustainability, social enterprise, good diets, nutrition, and fitness. And just while I'm speaking of that, I think one of the really important areas that we've developed is in the area of sustainability. The Sustainability Office with Alana, that's head with a large component of students behind it. We have the bike lab down in the square, which is now becoming a major hub for community development of all kinds of young people from around the city now come to not only repair their bikes, but to talk about how this can become an alternative form of transportation, an exciting innovation. We are very close to meeting our goal of meeting Kyoto standards, not new standards that push the threshold down to 2020. Within the year or two, we will meet Kyoto standards that were set based upon 1990 standards. I think we'll be the only university in the country that will be able to do that. That's taken time. It's taken some resources. It's taking an awful lot of energy from our students in particular. And so these are small examples, and we could spend more time, but I won't do that, about how we must develop a third stream, a third track of revenue development to stabilize our base, founded on our strong academic competence and areas of interest. The two are not separate. The two are integrated. It's one of the important paradoxes. So the idea that somehow there are segments or segregations within the capacity of the university to work, I think is not the reality. The reality is that we must bring all the units together in a working, functional, cooperative way. And an area where that's, I think, beginning to develop a new sense of expression is in the notion of a healthy campus. You want to know where we have a special niche, along with the other things I've described? Is in the building of a place in the city that can be looked at as a source of health, healing, and wellness, that can provide the kind of development and direction that's so important in terms of the sustainability of individual life and life on the planet itself. And again, we have the people to do it. We have the resources. Our new faculty of kinesiology that is opening this fall, David Fitzpatrick, is a demonstration of that kind of commitment in terms of where we move. And as many of you who were there yesterday would recognize, in the sod turning that we had for the new health recplex, which is one of those tweeter words that you have to kind of get your tongue around, but is easier to spell than the others. It would be a multi-use field for playing soccer, football, ultimate, baseball, track, field, wrestling. It will house 2 event rooms, including soundproof rooms for drumming and powwow groups, as part of the healing traditional knowledge of our First Nations and Inuit and Indigenous people. The new rec complex includes within it the Duckworth Center. There are no longer 2 separate buildings, they are one and the same. And out of that will be development of athletic therapy, medical clinics for service to students, staff, faculty, and community. And out of that will grow, as David so strongly presented yesterday at the sod turning, opportunities for new research into problems of concussions, diet, of young people in sports. Opens up a whole new area of development for this university. One of the elements on that is a community charter, where we, working with a broad coalition of youth-serving agencies and community stakeholders in the downtown area, with the town hall meetings and individual sort of dialogues, establishing principles which will include openness and inclusion, accessibility, and guarantees of use and space. Out of that, they will undertake a reciprocal responsibility to offer new programs, to manage new sports leagues for inner-city youth, for inner-city adults, to really recreate a new sense of how we become a hub for the development of a strong impulse in the downtown area to give people an opportunity and choice, which they haven't had for years. this really will be a place that we can work on. And the principles ratified by the Board of Regents, I think, combined with a new Community University Committee for Oversight, will give us, again, a unique way of doing things and a distinctive way of establishing relationships. And I also just want to mention, for those who have got their pencils out, that the United Health and Rec Complex will be revenue generating, with operations supported by a mix of leases, parking fees, support from an athletic student fee, which our students approved in a referendum, and generous grants from provincial and municipal governments. That's partnership. That's the way it works. And it will sort of benefit not just us in terms of our direct use, but have a multiplication effect, a magnifying effect for the entire city itself. So it is a paradox in a way, isn't it? We've got some strengths, we've got ability, we've got talent, we've got enthusiasm, we've got energy, we've got resilience, but at the same time we've got challenges that we have to sort of understand and help redesign our way of doing it. But I would sort of make a case to all of you as part of this assessment of the state of the university that this is a constructive paradox that works. Our strong liberal arts, science core gives us the freedom to experiment with new programs. Our success in the past leads to a certain confidence, and therefore we can take some risks. Our faculty is strong in theory and knowledge, and thus can inform scholarship and research that develops practice and practical solutions. Our faculty has the freedom to deepen inquiry into traditional disciplines so the university can address contemporary economic, social needs of society without weakening its mission. All those who draw dichotomies between those are so wrong. They don't understand the way we are working. It is a paradox that builds, that creates, and develops. And there's nothing wrong with being a paradox if in fact it makes you stronger, better, and more alive. Our strong academic foundations appeal to traditional students, but thus providing a supportive environment for those students who have been underrepresented, our Aboriginal communities, New Canadians, inner city residents. There's not a dichotomy between that. Those who try to draw it are simply sort of looking through the wrong end of the lens. And we're firmly rooted in a local reality so we can embrace global challenges with much greater understanding, impact, and result. This combination of qualities is, I believe, the foundation of the resilience, that quality that I spoke about at the beginning. It grants us a full flexibility to overcome challenges, to seize opportunities, and to adapt change while still maintaining our core missions and values and intellectual integrity. I hope that's clear, because if we don't understand the constructive energies and forces that flow out of our paradox, then we're missing the boat. We're not getting it. And that's really, I guess, is the message in today's statement. Look at what we have and the strengths that we have developed and how we adapt and use them in a way to broaden and deepen our level of action, responsibility, and opportunity. I believe that students of all ages educated at this university, the public who comes into our continuing education courses, the people who show up on Selkirk Avenue to learn about development, the young people who come into the Wichiwakanok Center, are really a grounding in fields that ultimately lead not only to their personal sort of enhancement, but to ultimately a commitment, a contribution to a world which is more sustainable more just, hopefully someday more peaceful. And I think that this university is in a place and a time where we can make an important contribution. So I look forward to our continued work together as a united campus so we can help to find the continuing gift of learning that this university has provided since the Murray House put some stones in place for a one-room classroom in the Selkirk settlement on Main Street. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And I want you to note that I didn't have my wife introduce me either, so it's I should have. It would have been a much better presentation, but I don't know. James, we've kind of gone over a little bit of time in your reception. Do you want to do a few questions, or do you just want to mingle and talk, and we'll come at it later? I'm going to be meeting with all the faculty councils beginning next week, so we'll have a chance to kind of get these things out and discuss them further. So why don't we take advantage of our hospitality offered by our residents of Richardson. And again, I really appreciate your coming and your willingness to sit through and listen to this statement. And I look forward to seeing the alumni at the reception tonight. So let's go back to our day jobs.